Is there ever a situation where violence is acceptable? That would fall under self-defense protections. You can use a reasonable proportionate amount of violence in self-defense or when protecting someone else who is in immediate danger. I watched that video a few times. The asset was just sort of acting tough and made some threatening movements. This apparently enraged the hero dude who tackled him to the ground. A jury might be sympathetic to that. But then he starts kicking the guy while he's no longer a threat and lying motionless. That might be considered excessive. Whether they are arrested is perhaps a different issue than if it was acceptable. If someone is hitting a pregnant woman, they deserve to be forcibly removed, and if they happen fall onto the curb and suffer a serious injury, that's just too bad. Yes. However, there are rules to follow. 1. Tell no one. Before or after 2. Hit first and hit hard. If you are protecting yourself or someone else, violence is allowed, so long as it is necessary. Once the attacker is down, it is no longer necessary to continue hitting them, as such violence is no longer acceptable. Morally acceptable, yes. Legal, it depends on a lot of factors. A man was recently arrested for killing the man who harmed his daughter. I believe he was morally correct. Sometimes violence should be answered in kind. Remains to be seen whether he will be tried or convicted. Self-defense, yes. This also applies to the defense of others. There was that dad who shot his son's molester and didn't go to jail for it. Would the hero really be arrested? It's certainly possible. Keep in mind that an arrest is not the same as a conviction, though. If the police decide to make an arrest, and the local prosecutor decides to issue charges, then the hero would be entitled to a trial where they can make a defense claim and get testimony from witnesses. Being arrested is not a guarantee that someone is guilty. That's what the trial is there for. If you were legally in the wrong, you'd have to very much be in the moral right in the eyes of every single party in order to get spared from the legal system. An example of this is Gary Plotch, who shot in the head and instantly killed the man who molested his son as he was being transported to face trial. There is morally acceptable, then there is legal, then there is whether it would be a conviction, and they aren't all the same. Would the hero really be arrested depends on the jurisdiction. It gets pretty bad in some areas, with the cops not going after the criminals, but going after the people who defend themselves against the criminals. Violence is a tool. Violence is the provoking force of law. The short as is, if you and your peers believe that force was justified, then it is justified. The courts with the same standards will judge it later. There may be a disagreement between those two, but violence itself is meant as a tool to civil society to teach fools who can't learn from any other means. You should always attempt to coach and teach first, although I would say that a person should only do it if it's cut and dry. Personally, I believe people have gotten too confident being absolute assholes because they know they won't get punched. Everybody is afraid to go to jail, and that's logical. I definitely believe there are many people who wouldn't be as obnoxious or just downright terrible people if they'd had received some fists to the face. Important distinction. Whether or not someone is arrested has nothing to do with whether or not their actions were morally good. Correct. With that out, if the way, yes, I absolutely believe sometimes violence is the right thing to do. It's always a tragedy when that occurs, but it is better to fight oppression than suffer under it. See the Warsaw Uprising, John Brown, and that video of a Nazi being punched out. Nazis, it is always acceptable. Self-defense can also be applied when someone else is the victim. You are not required to watch other people get beaten up. You are allowed and encouraged to intervene. And if you do, and if you have to use violence in order to do so, you will generally not be arrested or face charges unless you suddenly leave the scope of self-defense, i.e. if you continue attacking and injuring the would-be assailant long after they've ceased their behavior. Of course, you could end up temporarily getting arrested if there's no security footage or witnesses confirming your side of the story, and the other person claims you just assaulted them. Are you talking legally acceptable or morally acceptable? Self-defense. Yes, there are many situations violence is acceptable. Someone is in immediate danger to yourself or your family. Someone accidentally puts mayonnaise on your sandwich. That one just might be acceptable to me, as I really don't like mayonnaise.